Rain threatened to bucket down on the launching of Lake Macquarie's first water taxi this morning, but the sky cleared to allow Mayor Doug Carley to swamp the boat's deck with something sweeter. The Belmara is the brainchild of Brian Campbell and David O'Mara. The two Western Lake Macquarie residents have begun the service to provide a quicker link to the other side of the water that has divided east and west for so long.
We can go from Toronto to the 16-footers in around about 12 minutes as opposed to 25 to 30 driving around in your motor car.
The boat can carry 26 passengers and the fare is $12 from Toronto to Belmont and back. And although the service has cost $100,000 to get off the ground, the Belmara partners are confident that their investment will be returned.
All the western side of the lake, there's no public transport as such. We've found that there's over 8,000 members of the Belmont 16-footers that live on the western side of the lake.
Alderman Carley says the boat will have uses beyond being a taxi.
I think so. I think it will be they'll be able to extend their business into tourism, be able to provide the opportunity to take groups of people around the lake. We hope to be able to, as a council, to take advantage of that purpose.
The Belmara should make its first commercial voyage on New Year's Eve.
Thieves gained access to Halmate's factory in Islington early yesterday morning. The only item stolen was the company's safe, which contained about $3,000. The door leading to the office where the safe was located was rammed. A trolley was used to wheel the safe through the building to the rear exit.
I think 2 or 3 people would be scratching to get it out, so they're very strong people, or well, there's more than 2 or 3 people, I believe.
Today, another business was coming to terms with the same loss. The safe at Rovert Lighting in Broadmeadow was stolen after trading finished on Saturday. The company lost an estimated $7,000 in cash and credit card dockets. A third safe was stolen from a company in Tyes Hill. Police believe the 3 incidents may be linked.
A number of the premises have been entered in a similar fashion. Also, the way they've made entry in the safe has been a very similar fashion. So it tends to make us believe it's the same group of people committing most of the safe robberies throughout Newcastle.
Police have launched Operation Safecracker in an attempt to solve these thefts. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Sorry, just get up here, then fall backwards, like she was stumbling backwards, and she just hit her head on the concrete. That was about it. I just jumped over and the fellow and I were the first to assist.
The rescue helicopter left Newcastle at 5 o'clock this morning, bound for the Forbes Creek area about 50 kilometres west of Wauchope. Dense rainforest made spotting the bushwalkers almost impossible. Thanks to a signal fire to guide the rescue team, help was soon on hand. 2 paramedics were winched down to the bushwalkers, where a 50-year-old Sydney man was treated for a fractured collarbone. He'd spent the night in the gorge after stumbling down a rock ledge. While one man stayed with the victim, the second companion went for help. 3 hours later, police and an ambulance officer were on their way. However, they could not transport the man by foot and called the helicopter to winch him to safety. The man was flown to the Port Macquarie airfield where he was taken by ambulance to the Hastings District Hospital. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Peter Melton, ranked second in the nation, compiled 45 points to finish third overall. The current giant of the Supercross circuit, 16-year-old Anthony Osbert of Sydney, turned in another outstanding performance to finish second outright after amassing 47 points. But the man who has stamped his authority on the Australian Supercross scene for some time, Glenn Bell, showed a touch of class in remaining undefeated for the night, finishing with 60 points. No doubt the many months Bell has spent overseas gaining experience is now paying dividends. The tour will now move on to the Gold Coast. There wasn't much anyone could do but wait. The players resigned to a relaxing chat while others just settled into a good book. Lions people opted for a quiet game of cards, and the many spectators were scattered throughout the resort praying for a break in the weather which ultimately didn't arrive. Tomorrow the singles section of the tournament begins. World number 5 Ivan Lendl will tackle Australian Wally Masur, and Jonas Svensson clashes with Patrick McEnroe. In the evening, Roach meets Rosewell, while Newcomb and Druitt will do battle, followed by a doubles between the legends.
The RSPCA says many animals have been neglected while owners have been away on holiday this Christmas. This Maltese Terrier was found on a Hamilton street severely neglected. The problem has been compounded this year by the recession. While the family pet is often an important member of the household, the RSPCA says an increasing number of owners can't afford to keep their animals.
It still hurts all of us here to have very genuine and caring people come in to surrender their animals, simply saying that they can no longer afford to keep them. And in a lot of cases, it's a very, very sad parting.
Only 10% of these cats and dogs will find homes. The rest will be humanely destroyed. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
McEnroe opened well and electing to receive in the first game paid dividends for the New Yorker. Svensson immediately levelled with a big forehand and games went with serve for the next 5. McEnroe crowded the net on numerous occasions and it was coming off. But then Svensson stepped up a gear and his serve became a major weapon. He broke McEnroe to lead 5-3 and then thundered a couple down to take the set. Svensson had a little luck in breaking in the opening game of the second. And then followed up with stunning ground shots from both wings. Svensson kept the pressure on to race to 5-love in the second set and then served out the match. World number 5 Ivan Lendl hasn't had the best of first round matches in previous years, but maybe his luck is changing. After dropping serve early, Masur hit back to get within striking distance of the champion. But that was it as Lendl cranked up the serve. And another to take the first set 6-2. Maybe Lendl wanted to get to golf early today as he blasted his way to a 3-0 lead in the second, mixing power with touch. Behind 5-1, Wally hit back with tenacious tennis, while Lendl was relentless in his pursuit for the victory. And he clinched the win in typical fashion. Tomorrow, Lendl meets McEnroe in the first match, followed by Svensson and Masur. NBN's telecast begins at 1 p.m.
The devastating storm struck at about 8 o'clock last night, catching the village completely by surprise. Large hailstones smashed windows and damaged cars, while gale-force winds ripped roofs from houses.
And I opened it up and the door, the wind shut me back, hit me back, and but then I walked in the room and the wardrobe fell down and just missed me.
Daylight revealed the full extent of the wild 30-minute storm, and residents spent New Year's Eve cleaning up the widespread damage. This tractor was toppled onto its side by the cyclonic blast, and a number of sheds crumbled under the onslaught. A roof was uplifted from the village garage and dumped on the bowling green, while chimneys were blown over like matchsticks. In nearby paddocks, the results of flash flooding were evident. All roads into the town were closed last night to all but emergency service crews. Initial clean-up work was concentrated on making damaged houses waterproof and restoring power. But with debris littering the village, it could be weeks before life in Ashford returns to normal. For residents, the storm is the worst in memory.
Almost every house in Ashford would have a garden shed or their garage unroofed or totally demolished.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Sporting his new clothing design, Lendl came out with guns blazing. The world number 5 meant business, his powerful ground strokes reinforcing that. Trailing 3 games to 1, McEnroe's frustration surfaced. In an unforgiving mood, Lendl opened the floodgates, first with this, followed by this. As McEnroe floundered to find form, Lendl grew in confidence, streaking to a 5-2 lead. With McEnroe leading 1-love, the rain came. But after a 20-minute wait, the crowd was rewarded with the rally of the match. Two all in the second, and Lendl produced precision play to secure the vital break. Desperate to save the match, McEnroe changed tactics. But Lendl's power prevailed, the 31-year-old wrapping up the match 6-4 in the second. Although happy with the win, Lendl, like many spectators, is frustrated with the weather.
I wish it was very hot actually, because that's most likely to be like that in Melbourne, and I'm getting a bit fed up with this rain.
Despite this, the rain refused to go away. It stopped the match between Masur and Svensson after just 20 minutes of play. At that stage, Masur was leading 3 games to 2. NBN's coverage continues tomorrow from 1 p.m. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
In Armidale, organisers have been using all available technology to have the wicket ready for tomorrow's game. Measures Bede Ryan of the Northern Tablelands Cricket Council says will have the wicket ready. As organisers continued to watch the skies, the West Indies flew into Tamworth from the Gold Coast. They'll go into tomorrow's game with some well-known players.
Desmond Haynes, Malcolm Marshall, Richie Richardson is captain. They're the sort of more established players, Curtly Ambrose, and then there are some of the youngsters who are now establishing themselves.
The game starts at 10 o'clock at the Armidale Sports Ground.
These people don't have the right to vote a government in, yet they can still suffer under its policies. Youth workers Margaret and Garth Leary have spent the last 6 months compiling thousands of responses from teenagers on the issues which most affect them. On top of the list, unemployment.
You can take rejections for so long and then we all sort of start to have self-doubts and lack self-esteem.
1 in 3 15 to 19-year-olds are unemployed, compared with 1 in 10 adults. Through the report, the youth of the area have called for money to be spent in vital areas. A realistic approach to education, giving appropriate training for the workforce, more counsellors in schools, more youth workers in the communities. Health and transport issues were highlighted. 95% of teenagers said marijuana should be decriminalised, arguing the community already tolerates the use of alcohol. Garth Leary says he's been impressed with the determination and skills of the youth, especially through the tight economic times. State government ministers will respond to the report at a youth forum next month. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Emergency crews were called to the crash site on the New England Highway at McDougall's Hill, north of Singleton, at about 7 a.m, where a vehicle carrying a Queensland family of 4 had collided head-on with another vehicle carrying 2 people. The 30-year-old Queensland woman was trapped in the car for more than 30 minutes. All 6 people involved in the crash required medical attention. 4 were taken by road to Singleton Hospital. The trapped woman's 5-year-old son suffered serious spinal injuries. Both were taken to John Hunter Hospital at Newcastle. The little boy was later airlifted to Sydney's North Shore Hospital, where it's feared he may be a paraplegic. Further inquiries are being conducted by the Police Accident Investigation Squad. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Kinser was sensational at the Motordrome last weekend in the wet when he defeated a star-studded field of fellow Americans and a hot Aussie contingent to win the 30-lap Grand National. Kinser started from 14th spot on the grid and slowly but surely picked off his opponents with a drive of super precision and great skill, finally taking the lead 12 laps from home, and from there he was never headed. Kinser's main rivals could be the Australian Chargers, George and Brooke Tatnell, Robert Farr, Skip Jackson and a host of others out to wreck the Great American's dream run around Australia.
At the start of business today, former incumbent Liberal Bob Graham was the sole nominee. By noon, the field had swelled to 8. Labor candidate Grant McBride has also re-nominated and is once again expected to be a major contender. Mr McBride intends campaigning strongly on the issues hitting the hip pockets of average families. Also re-nominating is independent Tony Irving and Lynn Sawyer representing the Democrats. Among the new contenders, Peter Clifford and Stuart Scott Irving, both independents, Sean James representing one of Australia's newest political parties, the Citizens Electoral Councils, and Bob Hudson for Grey Power. Last night, Mr Hudson, a pensioner from the entrance, found a novel way to launch his campaign. The seat is a crucial one for the Greiner government. Should Labor win the seat, it'll mean the Liberal and Labor parties holding 47 seats each, with the independents holding the balance of power. Voting is compulsory for the January 18 election. Pre-poll and postal voting will be allowed. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The last few shifts at the mine have worked to retrieve equipment from the underground tunnels 130 metres down and 2 kilometres out under the seafloor. Lambton Colliery cut its first ground in 1886, but things have probably never been as tough as now.
The hardest thing to do is to get consent to open a mine, and the next most difficult thing to do is to close a mine.
The pit mouth will be bricked up and its air shafts capped, snuffing out generations of toil and the jobs of 150 people. Work prospects aren't good.
One job going at Torres Colliery, but there's 70 feds in one job, so there's not a lot going at the moment, no.
Unfortunately, we've only been able to use a handful of these workers at our other sites. We are, however, opening up some new mines in the valley in the next couple of years, and the men that leave this mine go with the best reputation that I can give to any other potential employer. They've worked exceptionally well.
The FAI-owned mine had supplied coking coal to the BHP, but eventually economic pressures dried up a steady stream of profit. Miners and management worked together on industrial reforms to postpone the inevitable. Toward the end, miners considered running the colliery themselves to preserve jobs, but it was a chance they couldn't afford.
Had we been able to experience some increases in revenues, particularly with negotiations of prices being denominated in Japan, it may have had a few more years, and that couple of years may have been enough to help the men into our next operation.
Around 30 boats set off this morning from Port Macquarie. While the competition is serious business, the competitors love to indulge in the traditional sail past. This is the 8th Golden Lure event, and each year it gets bigger. This year boats from Port Stephens, Foster, Coffs Harbour, Broken Bay and Townsville are competing, all aiming for that trophy of solid gold in the shape of a marlin. The boats will report back to Port Macquarie each night and have their catch weighed. They have until Saturday to catch the fish to top the tournament. The boats will also participate in a tagging program which will assist the Department of Fisheries in monitoring fish stocks. Mineral Deposits Limited lodged a development application to mine the saltwater beach area last February. The Greater Taree Council was to make the decision on whether the mining operation went ahead or not. But the government has now taken control out of Council's hands. Although the matter had not been officially discussed by Council, it is known most aldermen object to it. The government's move has outraged residents.
Well, we feel as if we've been taken for a ride.
According to Planning Minister Robert Webster, the government decided on the Commission of Inquiry because of its coastal policy and the environmental sensitivity of the saltwater area. Both council and residents say they'll make submissions to the Independent Commission.
McWilliam's Mount Pleasant winery was living up to its name today. With Pecolban swathed in blue skies and green fields, it seemed as though two enemies of the vigneron, heavy rain and drought, had passed. But as the 1992 harvest got underway, McWilliam's winemaker Phil Ryan was keeping an eye out for another foe of the grape.
What's next at the moment is the birds. We've had probably the worst year that I can remember with bird damage, and we've got almost every species there is known to man, I think, flying in the vineyards at the moment.
McWilliam's has been the first of the Hunter wineries to launch this year's harvest, with pickers among the vines from 6 this morning. The harvest is almost 2 months early, but Mr Ryan says the time and the grapes are ripe for the makings of a great vintage. The beginning of the grape harvest is not only time for vignerons to breathe a sigh of relief, it's welcome news for the hundreds of casual pickers who flock to Pecolbin seeking work in these recessed times.
We're getting a lot of inquiries, yes. With unemployment the way it is, there's a lot of people interested in picking grapes this year.
The yield could be down by as much as 50% because of the drought, but that will be forgotten when the cork is pulled on what is expected to be quality wine, especially the reds.
Some of the greatest wines have been made in the Hunter Valley during these drought conditions. I can remember a fellow working in France once, and a Frenchman told me there that all vintages in France are good. Some are very good and some are very, very good, so we're looking forward to a very, very good one. Thank you.
Proving without a doubt he is the greatest, Kinser shattered the existing one-lap record of 13.08 seconds. And then high drama in the main race, the Sprint Car Masters. Rod Bowen and Robert Farr staged a two-man war for most part of the 25 laps, wheel to wheel around the track until a stoppage interrupted the battle. But on the restart, all hell broke loose as neither Farr or Bowen would grid up correctly. Bowen taking things into his own hands and trying to bump Farr off the track until they both destroyed each other's chances. Farr and Bowen withdrew to the infield where feelings overflowed. Pit crews and drivers mixing it with scenes more reminiscent of Festival Hall. Back to racing, and Brooke Tatner was the next victim as he and Steve Kinser collided. Officials quickly sent the world champion to the rear of the field, blaming him for causing the crash, a dubious decision in any man's language. Kinser showed his disgust, withdrawing to the infield. For the record, Australian champion Max Dumsney won the race. And tomorrow night, the rivalry between local drivers and the American contingent will continue in the Super Sedans with the running of the International Pairs Championship, and after last night's action, anything could happen.
A few men who were planting trees in the Uralla area decided they would call fellow tree planters together and see what was happening in the rest of the country. The result, Tree Fest. This year the event will be held in March on Vicky and John Taylor's property, The Hill, Kentucky, south of Armidale. Tree Fest will bring together machinery inventors, tree planters, children and interested parties in an effort to make the environment a better and easier place in which to live. Competitions run during the festival will cater for those with varying talents. A $500 cash prize will go to the most original piece of machinery that can be used for propagating, planting and enhancing the growth of tree seedlings. High standards are encouraged from commercial inventors, with entries already including a new seeding pot from Sweden, as well as a South Australian direct seeding machine. But the competitions and exhibitions are not restricted to adults.
We think that tree decline, really is number one environmental issue up here, and we want to involve kids as much as we can.
$750 in prize money is up for grabs in the children's seed growing competition, while other activities include light-hearted tree planting races for the older children and exhibits of artwork displaying the role of trees on farms.
Reverent moments for members of the local Russian community. Today is their Christmas Day, and celebrations began with a traditional Mass to acknowledge the birth of Christ.
We go by the Julian calendar, which is 13 days behind the modern calendar that everybody uses now. So in actual fact, today is the 25th of December for us.
then a chance to renew old acquaintances. Many of the congregation have been in Australia for more than 40 years. On to dinner, and the sharing continues. Most of the community say that while Australia is their home now, today's traditional festive celebrations are a sentimental reminder of life in their native land.
Christmas Eve was more important than first Christmas Day. Christmas tree was lit, presents distributed. That was Christmas Eve.
The food we eat is more heavier and more spicy and more fatty.
But Anna says that's changed somewhat. Australia's warm Christmas weather influencing the menu.
Before the super sedans got their program underway, the litre sprint cars provided the curtain raiser. But for one driver, it was an up and down sort of a night. A unique program for the super sedans, a similar format to test match racing where two drivers took on another pair with points for first to fourth. And the stars of the night were Grenville Anderson in the number 10 car and John Leslight in 81, both from Lismore. Throughout the 13 heats, Anderson and Leslight remained undefeated, with Anderson the outstanding driver, smashing the one-lap record in the process. In the final, the Lismore connection was up against Gunnedar's Alan Baker and Bob Brewer, but even this formidable combination couldn't find a way past the pair from the north.
Jock Bullen runs a cycling goods store in Armidale. He's also team manager and one of the coaches for Australia's Olympic cycling squad. The team is now training hard for the Games in August. Jock will join them in Italy in April as they continue fine-tuning their performances before Barcelona.
I think it's probably one of the best teams that we've put forward for a long time. The time going on last year's performance at the World Championships. I think the team was slightly under strength there last year, and now with the extra members we have in, the junior members we've brought into the team, and the extra training and things we've learnt from last year, I think they'll be a real contenders.
Jock was associated with the medal-winning cycling squad which competed in the 1988 Olympics and the 1990 Commonwealth Games. Although the work is time-consuming and demanding, he says it has its rewards. Mr Bullen believes the squad this year is likely to bring home gold.
I'd hope that we certainly do, but I think going on the past performances we've had and the indications we've had from last year's preparation, that I could see us definitely amongst the medals.
It's a variation on coals to Newcastle. The Carrington grain silos that once held produce from the Hunter and New England ready for export are now containing oats shipped in from South Australia. What's brought the turnaround is the drought that has parched New South Wales. Since May, 4 shiploads of oats have been brought to Newcastle, but that's one import never heard of before this drought.
To my knowledge, none at all. Most of it, as you'd be aware, has been exported. So this is a first, as far as I know, into Newcastle.
The bulk carrier express unloaded almost 6,000 tonnes of oats and barley today. All of that is bound for this region's farms.
It'll be used for stock feed and also for the chicken industry.